Hi, I'm Gordon from Cameralabs and you're invited to my 18th birthday party. That's YouTube years of course, but it still means that I've been making camera videos here since 2006. So a huge thanks to all of you for watching them now, then or anytime in between. And in a neat coincidence, you're also watching my 600th video. So I thought it was the perfect opportunity to do something a bit different and to celebrate with a quick look back over 18 channel highlights. Now these are going to be in chronological order, and I'm also going to concentrate on the earlier years since there were far fewer channels making camera videos back then. It all started with the Canon EOS 400D or Rebel XTI uploaded back in September 2006, a breathless 3-minute one-shot ad-lib to camera without a single cut. Sorry about that. I stood in front of my plainest wall at home as I thought that's what presenters did. Although living in Queenstown, New Zealand at the time, I literally had Lord of the Rings filming locations outside my house. Luckily, I did incorporate those views in my sample images and demonstrations later on. Meanwhile, my giant head framed in 4x3 in those early videos was due to filming in standard definition on a Sony mini DV camcorder and having to operate it at arm's length with a lens that sadly didn't go any wider. If you were watching back then and are still with me despite all that, I salute you. Later that year, in November 2006, I reviewed the Olympus E-400 and thankfully even included some B-roll to distract you from the floating head of doom. Today, Olympus is probably best known for their mirrorless micro four thirds cameras, but the E400 predated those by several years and was actually a DSLR, amazingly squeezing a reflex mirror and optical viewfinder into that tiny body. It also became the last of their DSLRs to employ a CCD sensor, making it highly sought after today. I actually recently bagged one in good condition for an upcoming retro review on my Dino Bytes channel, but my original review is still here if you're interested. Also in November 2006, I reviewed the Fujifilm FinePix F30, one of a wealth of compact digicams around in the mid-2000s. Browse the early days of my channel and you'll find absolutely loads of them, but the F30 stood out due to above average image quality. This, coupled with its compact size, has resulted in mild unicorn status for the F30 and its successors today, and if you find one at a good price, it's a solid option. Oh, and if you see a model with FD in the title, that just means face detection. Fast forward to February 2007 and I had the Nikon D80 in my hands, with my review including some menu demonstrations captured directly from the analog TV output, a technique that people still comment and ask about today. The D80 arrived during what was arguably Nikon's imperial phase, where all of its DSLRs from entry-level to semi-pro pretty much proved to be winners. The mid-range series from the D70 to D90 in particular out-featured rivals for only a little extra money and became some of the best sellers of all time. Today the D90 may overshadow it as the first DSLR with video, I'll come to that, but the D80 counters as the last in this series with a CCD sensor, which many vintage fans prefer. You can also pick up a used D80 for less than $100 or pounds today, or indeed its semi-pro sibling the D200 for a little bit more, both sporting superb ergonomics in addition to those large CCD sensors. These are the cameras that I'd recommend to beginners or students on a tighter budget. Now let's jump to September 2007 for the EOS 40D, Canon's first DSLR with live view. Yep, until this point, most DSLRs, including all of Canon's, exclusively used their optical viewfinders for composition, leaving their screens for playback and menus only. Now, many traditionalists were skeptical of live view at the time, but I immediately saw the benefit that a magnified view could bring to manual focusing under challenging conditions, such as macro or astrophotography. So I followed up with a second video showing how I used live view to photograph the moon and planets through my telescope. In fact, the 40D kept on giving with a third video showing how you could also connect it to a Garmin GPS to embed position information at the time of shooting. Yep, that's in Queenstown. Now my channel wasn't just about new gear reviews though. In December 2007 I launched a series of tutorials aimed at complete beginners called DSLR Tips. These went right back to basics, explaining how to control things like exposure, the depth of field, or how to use polarizing filters. Much later in July 2018 I made a new tutorial about long exposure landscape photography from Brighton, my current home in the UK, with my friend and fellow YouTuber Ben Harvey behind the camera. Ben's since helped me on multiple projects, including tutorials about photographing the moon, along with various action, 360 and vlogging camera reviews. Check out his channel Ben Harvey Photography for his own reviews and excellent fine art tutorials. But back to 2008, Gordon, when I was still living in New Zealand, and what would turn out to be my last two Pentax reviews, the K20D and K200D for May and July respectively. Now, I really like Pentax DSLRs and how they offered weatherproofing at a far lower price point than rivals, but the small market in New Zealand meant that all but the largest brands were handled by distributors, who weren't always set up for supplying press or people like me with blown units, and should a distributor change their strategy, change their mind, or close down, sourcing some of those brands became next to impossible. That's why there were no more Pentax reviews on my channel. I think many viewers on YouTube assume that long-time reviewers like myself can just phone up a company and source whatever we want at any time, but it's not always that simple, even back in the UK. Moving on to October 2008, I tested the Nikon D90, the very first DSLR to sport video recording, albeit with an APS-C sensor and in 720p quality, two aspects that Canon would soon trump. But Nikon got there first and began a transformation from photo-only DSLRs to hybrid and even video-focused bodies. But as the successor to the D80, the D90 was also simply a hugely popular mid-range DSLR for photography, which in turn saw my review pass 1 million views. It's one of my most popular to date. Now, Nikon may have been first with DSLR video, but Canon took that particular ball and ran with it. In December 2008, I reviewed their EOS 5D Mark II, which became the first full-frame DSLR with Full HD 1080p video. Sure, it was only up to 30p and you had to focus manually, but the chance to use any lens, including those with an extremely shallow depth of field, redefined the visual language of modern video and filmmaking. It was also around this time that I stepped up my own production values, thank goodness, switching from a standard definition mini DV Sony camcorder to a Canon HV30, which recorded in HDV 1080i. Finally, I was presenting in widescreen HD, but it was still using a tape-based format which had to be played into your computer editor in real time. If you made a half-hour take, you'd need half an hour just to capture that single clip. That's another reason the 5D Mark II was so popular in commercial environments, capturing 1080 video onto a memory card that you could read so much faster. Today, hardly anyone is making new DSLRs, with most brands having adopted mirrorless technology, but this actually didn't arrive until the Panasonic Lumix G1, which I reviewed in February 2009. Sure, every compact camera with a fixed lens could also be described as a mirrorless camera, but I'm talking about larger sensor cameras with interchangeable lenses. The G1 became the first camera to adopt the new Micro Four Thirds standard developed by Panasonic and Olympus. Rather than making a digital version of an existing mount, Micro Four Thirds was designed from day one for digital and mirrorless systems. This meant it also needed new lenses, at least for a fully native experience, although you could also adapt those from other systems with varying results. Mirrorless also meant full-time live view with electronic composition through the viewfinder. Again, traditionalists complained that they couldn't match the quality or experience of an optical viewfinder, and indeed they can't in terms of battery life, but I personally appreciated how all the live view benefits I valued from, say, the Canon 40D screen could now be enjoyed at eye level, including 100% coverage, previewing colour effects, magnified manual focusing assistance, and of course playing images, movies, or navigating menus. And as my own eyes have become increasingly long-sighted over the years, an EVF has become preferable for my own photography without the need for using glasses. This is all why I adopted mirrorless in 2009 and I've not looked back. 1 year later in 2010, photographer Chase Jarvis mentioned on his blog that he was visiting Queenstown, New Zealand. I dropped his team a line and to my surprise and delight, he actually agreed to a meetup and an interview a few days later. Now, you never know how big names are going to be in person, but Chase turned out to be really friendly, open, inquisitive about my own work, as well as very generous with his time, allowing a quick hello meeting to become an extended interview. Now, as a journalist, I'd done many interviews on and off camera, but I'd never actually had to set the cameras up myself, leading to an embarrassing and inconsistent mix of angles, formats, lighting, and terrible audio. In fact, it looked and sounded so bad at times that some people commented that I'd simply edited myself into an existing interview with Chase Jarvis. But hopefully the content shone through and it was definitely a highlight to meet Chase and his team. Moving on, it had always been an ambition of mine to view a rocket launch in person, so as NASA geared up for its final Space Shuttle missions in 2011, I planned a trip to Florida to try and see one in person. I thought I'd make a vlog about the experience, from flying into San Francisco to collect some of the rental gear before then heading on to Florida and the Cocoa Beach area. Unfortunately, Space Shuttle Endeavour's launch repeatedly scrubbed time after time, leaving me in the area with an expensive 500mm f4 lens and no rockets to point it at. Luckily though, there's loads of nice surfing and wildlife to film instead, so it wasn't all in vain. I also made a second video all about the experience of flying in from a foreign country for multiple attempts to view a launch which kept on getting scrubbed. I called it Go for Lunch, and you can find it on Vimeo, and I've got a link down below if you're interested. The good news though is I returned for the final launch in the programme STS-135, where Space Shuttle Atlantis successfully rocketed into space first time without a hitch. And that brings me back to New Zealand, where up to this point I'd mostly reviewed traditional DSLR and compact cameras, but a new category of action cameras was gaining popularity, spearheaded by companies like GoPro. Now, I'd missed reviewing their debut model, but borrowed the HD Hero 2 in November 2011. And this was the background, believe it or not, in my back garden at the time that I should have always used in my New Zealand videos. Sorry about that. Meanwhile, based in the adventure capital of the world, Queenstown certainly wasn't short of activities to test the Hero with either, and I enlisted the help of my local friend Scott Kennedy to literally throw himself out of planes and off bridges while recording the experience. Ironically, having only just stepped into my back garden to film a piece to camera with a nice background, this turned out to be one of the last videos that I made in Queenstown before leaving on what turned out to be an 18-month period of unplanned location independence and an equally unplanned move back to the UK. And so in May 2012, I posted the first of 5 videos all about working on the move during our travels. In the first one, I set the scene on the streets of San Francisco. We'd moved out of rented accommodation and put all our possessions in storage, so we had absolutely no commitments. Our plan had only been to go away for 3 or 4 weeks, but we ended up not settling until a year and a half later, at the point when the kids reached school age. Assuming a shorter trip though, I'd deliberately packed really light with a simple kit based on a Lumix GX1 and 3 lenses, along with a MacBook Air. So these would turn out to be my only camera, lenses and computer for over a year. And the longer I used them, the more I realised that this was actually a possible lifestyle, albeit working from increasingly unusual locations, such as Disney World to the Sahara Desert. Today there's loads of full-time travel vloggers or digital nomads embracing this kind of lifestyle, but back in 2012 it felt genuinely subversive at times. I'd have enjoyed making more videos about it, but the YouTube algorithm wanted me to stick to one thing and to do it at frequent, regular intervals. So I feel this period of irregularity actually harmed the growth of this channel, which frustratingly has only crept up since I returned over a decade ago. A year and a half later, in October 2013, we'd resettled in Brighton in the UK, and I was back on the YouTube grind, including the launch of Sony's full-frame mirrorless alpha system, with the original A7 and A7R. And yes, I'd found another white wall to stand in front of, although to be fair, this was in the room next to the initial Sony presentation. 3 years later, in July 2016, I was sat on my mini Moog beanbag sofa at home in Brighton, telling you all about Fujifilm's new X-T2. Now, I'd actually missed the original launch of the X series and was away travelling when the X-T1 arrived, but I had actually been shooting with an X-T1 for a lot of my own trips since then. In fact, my in-camera photography book, which you'll often see perched behind me on videos, mostly consists of images taken with that X-T1 or various Micro Four Thirds bodies. I initially wrote it to prove not only how JPEG engines had reached a point that RAW wasn't necessary for many situations, but also how mirrorless had truly come of age. In fact, I've grown so fond of Fujifilm's in-camera processing style that today my main travel camera is an X100V, and I've also made several videos all about the joys of travelling light with a camera that you love. Around 2016, I started making podcast-style reviews with Doug Kay, a San Francisco-based photographer that I'd previously met through the late Google Plus network, remember that? And several fun photo walks in the San Francisco area. Our first video podcasts were officially part of This Week in Photo, but we later spun off onto Cameralabs, and for this highlight I'm picking our chat about the launch of Canon's EOS R mirrorless system in October 2018. I loved our extended chats, but like so much of my online life, it was before the platforms really knew how to treat content like this. Back then, mixing long-form podcasts with shorter review videos on the same channel fed the algorithm an inconsistent experience, in turn resulting in lower views and promotion for both types of videos. So after a couple of years, I decided to go solo once more, with scripted reviews typically lasting between 15 and 25 minutes. But if you're out there, Doug, we love you. And for my final 18th highlight, I'm going to pick the Sony RX100 Mark VII, a powerful compact camera that I reviewed in July 2019. Now, as the 7th model in this series, you'd assume it'd just keep on going, but this ended up being the last one that was mostly aimed at photographers, before the series was rejigged into the ZV series for vloggers. 2 years later, the RX100-7 remained the best choice for a video I made about travelling light, and today, 5 years after launch, there's still nothing to really beat it in terms of features or size. In that time, the demand for compact cameras has skyrocketed, in part down to models like Fujifilm's X100 series, but amazingly few companies seem to be reacting to it. Sony's RX series from the Pocket 100, Full Frame 1 or Super Zoom 10s haven't been updated for years. Likewise for Canon's PowerShot G series, which also stalled back in 2019. Sure, COVID didn't exactly help any category, but the increasing demand for compacts, coupled with a continued lack of supply, remains a strangely unseized opportunity to me. My friend Jordan Drake of Petapixel likes to comment that everyone's actually working on new compact cameras as we speak, and soon will be flooded with models just as the demand heads elsewhere. The lack of new compacts has, however, partly driven a resurgence in vintage digicams of the 2000s. After all, why chase perfection with an expensive new camera when you can embrace the imperfections on a vintage model costing a fraction of the price? Now, as someone whose career in reviewing technology began on magazines in the early 90s, I actually tested most of these early digital cameras and now look back at this period with fond nostalgia. Indeed, most of you already know about my vintage channel Dinobytes, where I buy classic cameras, get them working again and take them out today for a new review. It's also fun to refer back to my original reviews from the 90s to remember what features were important back then. So that's 18 years of Cameralabs on YouTube, and I'd love to hear what you'd like to see on this channel going forward. Now, new gear reviews is what I've always done for over 30 years now, but the market has become so crowded on YouTube that it's difficult to stand out or to justify spending 7 to 14 days on a review when your video is then outperformed by one that might only take a day or two. But equally, I don't want to dilute my tests. If I were to start a Patreon or membership, for example, what would you like to see for the benefits? I mean, ultimately, I couldn't do any of this without your support. So once again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for watching, whether you're new to the channel or if you've been with me for some years, maybe even since the start. So I look forward to seeing you on the next review. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Oh, P.S. If you're interested in seeing the world, you might also enjoy a new travel tips channel that I started earlier this year. So check it out and do let me know what you think. And this really is goodbye.